My name is Jack DeHovitz. I'm a professor of infectious diseases at SUNY Downstate. And I appreciate seeing a relatively large number of you here at the Global Center, as well as the 150 or so who've registered as online participants. We're particularly pleased today to have the engagement of many of our trainees and faculty from our affiliated programs in other countries. I'm also grateful to the Senior Vice President for Research, David Christini, who's here and who I'll introduce you in a minute, for supporting this effort. This represents the fourth meeting that the Global Health Institute has had, a group of investigators in the SUNY system who together have focused on raising the global health profile of both the individual institutions, specifically in the system as a whole. Global health, as this audience well knows, is a multidisciplinary effort and often requires expertise beyond the walls of whatever campus that we're working at. The highlights that you'll be hearing about reflect the successful efforts in that regard. Today's focus, however, will be a little different than previous meetings. In the past, we primarily focused on US-based investigators and their work. But today we're going to be highlighting many of our in-country colleagues who will be speaking from their respective homes. In addition, today, I hope to go beyond the infectious disease focus that many of us have had. The fact that Jean and I cut our teeth on HIV is not unusual, but we're really interested in moving to non-communicable diseases and using the infrastructure we've built for infectious disease to address many of the research issues around non-communicable diseases. I know this is of particular interest to our speakers today from the Fogarty Center and CUGH. Before going any further, Jean, I'd like you to make a couple comments.
Thanks so much, Jack. And I also wanted to thank Downstate for the sponsorship of this meeting. We're all kind of like jumping up and down because this is the first meeting many of us have been at in a couple of years. We're hoping it's going to continue this way, but we're all a little apprehensive. But we're very excited. And when the Global Health Institute started about 5 or 6 years ago, I think our first meeting was about 30 people. And then right before COVID, we had our third meeting, which we were up to about 80 participants. And I looked this morning and we have close to 200 participants. So despite everything that's been happening, all of the individual and campus-based efforts that have really grown the interest in the Global Health Institute. And I think as you'll see today, the partnerships that have evolved have continued over time, and COVID really has magnified the need for this. The only last comment I'd make is that we have spent a lot of time putting the bios for everyone. If you're here, you've got a folder. If you're online, you can look at the website. So we're not going to spend a lot of time with lengthy introductions. Everybody is wonderful who's participating. But we're much more interested in the fact that we've got you all together and can get all of your thoughts collectively, and that's our goal. So welcome, and we hope today will be really valuable for you.
So before we go any further, I'd like to introduce David Christini, who's a Senior Vice President for Research at SUNY Downstate Health Science University and Professor of Physiology and Pharmacology, where his research focuses on understanding and therapies for cardiac arrhythmias. He was appointed as Senior Vice President of Research in 2020, and since he's come, he's dramatically changed the landscape of research at Downstate, this being one of his most interesting initiatives. So David, please feel free to say a couple words. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. And Jean, nice to meet you. So thank you, everybody. I'm really excited to be here today. This is such an important topic. And as Jack noted, our office and our team, some of whom are here, Aisha, Gabe, Marcus is joining us by Zoom, and Mimi is helping with a lot of the logistics. Thank you all for everything you're doing. Our office put in place a program to sponsor symposia here at the SUNY Global Center. We had calls for application and we selected 3, this being one of them because of the importance of this topic. The overarching goal of our series of symposia is to try to um, uh, invigorate collaborations, get new conversations happening, hopefully leading to additional extramural funding for Downstate and for SUNY more broadly. And so this really fits in very well with that. So we're really pleased to have the opportunity to do this. I'll just mention quickly the other 2 symposia that we are hosting. Everything is happening this month. On April 6th, we had our first. It was called Climate Inclusive Clinical Research. That was a collaboration mostly between Downstate College of Medicine and School of Public Health. And next week, we have the Translational Brain Health and Resilience Research Summit on Wednesday. So we're really thrilled to be able to do this. And I personally am excited to be here to learn more about the topic, about how Downstate and SUNY can help push ideas and progress forward. And lastly, before I go back to my seat, thank you, Dr. Kilmarx, for making the trip. And I'm really looking forward to your presentation. Okay, so everybody enjoy and have a great day.
Gene, you're going to introduce Dr. Kilmarx, but before we do, for those of you here, coffee will come eventually. And when it does, I'll let you know, and then you can just go out and grab a cup and come back in. We have a tight schedule, so no breaks today. Gene.
All right, so no breaks and late coffee, but we already know we're tough. The other thing I noticed that we don't have name badges, so I think we'll just have to all be outgoing, and when we have coffee, just introduce yourselves. I know everybody here, and like I said, everyone is wonderful, and I know most of the people on the Zoom call as well. I did want to wish everyone a pleasant Earth Day, and I will mention that the Global Health Institute is starting an initiative to work with climate change, alternative energy, and agricultural innovation. Topic for another meeting down the road, but to me, they're all kind of coming together. What I wanted to do was introduce our first speaker, Dr. Peter Kilmarx, and I won't read you his bio, but I would encourage you to read it. I've had the opportunity to become more acquainted with what Peter has done, and I think he's really a very incredible blend of a scientist, an educator, a physician, public health policymaker, an NIH leadership role, and all of these things together have brought him to the position of being the deputy director of the Fogarty International Center. And surprisingly, many people know that it's really nice to get an award from Fogarty, but a lot of people don't know about it in detail. So we've asked Peter to give us an overview and set the stage for the rest of the meeting today. So welcome, Peter.
Thanks very much, Gene, and good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to be here. This is my first in-person meeting in the COVID era, and one of my very last meetings was in Buffalo in 2019, and the first meeting I had canceled was to go be in Kingston in March of 2020. So it's great to be back in person. I guess we thought everyone would have a little Zoom box with our name at the bottom of it, so that's why we don't have our name tags. But yeah, so we'll have to make do with actually talking to people face to face. So I am an epidemiologist, so there will be a fair amount of data in these slides, but I think I've got a generous 45 minutes. I'll try to finish in less than that time and have some time for questions and discussion. But I am going to now see if I can advance here and think, do I have to use this or can I use the? Oh, there we go. Okay. So I'm going to talk about and make the case that NIH really is a global institution and that global health research being supported by the National Institutes of Health I'll talk about some work that I've been doing on research capacity metrics, and then in some more detail about Fogarty's research capacity building programs, and lastly, priorities and opportunities that we see in global health research. So just to begin with the basics, NIH is a science research institution. The mission is primarily first around the basic science in pursuit of fundamental knowledge about the nature and behavior of living systems. And then the second part of the mission, importantly, is the application of that knowledge to improve health. Oops, I'm getting an echo from Jack. So they, okay. No, I can still hear me. There's 27 institutes and centers at the NIH, basically organized around different disease types or organ systems or populations. 24 of these are grant-making institutes and centers, and the 3 at the bottom, they are more in supportive roles. This is showing the funding by institute and center at the NIH, and you can see there's the billionaires, the National Cancer Institute with nearly $7 billion, NIAID with over $6 billion, and aging is the third there. The National Institute on Aging has substantial new resources in recent years for Alzheimer's disease, and all the way on the right there is the Fogarty International Center with about $87 million. But we do punch above our weight, that we support the other centers in their international work, and we have the most co-funding in terms of, on a percentage basis, in terms of the support that we get from the other institutes and centers to implement our programs. So global health, global research really is a priority for the NIH. Dr. Collins, who stepped down at the end of last year as the director of the NIH when he came in 2009 and was asked about his priorities, to the surprise of some, he said that number 4 there, expanding research into diseases affecting the developing world, was one of his top priorities. And that was really borne out in his tenure and seeing the great growth in global health research that he personally supported. And one might ask, why would the NIH, if we're primarily interested in science, why pursue global health research? And there's a number of very strong rationales, reasons for that. There's unique populations, unique disease presentations, and genetics, especially in Africa, the cradle of humanity. There's much more genetic diversity, and we've put a lot of resources into genetic research in Africa as well as around the world. Also, unusual exposures and environment, especially, of course, infectious diseases. Tom Cole, the ranking member of the Health Appropriations Committee, said that he'd rather fight Ebola in West Texas than in West Africa than in West Texas. And I think we've seen around the world how important it is to be able to study, develop countermeasures for infectious diseases at their origin and not wait till they're in the United States. But there's also unique interventions. There's been a lot of frugal and novel technologies and M-health technologies that have been developed globally that have global application, including in the US. There's the insights and expertise of very diverse investigators. The best scientists aren't all in the United States, and it's important to have these global collaborations. There's large, potentially treatment-naive patient populations, especially important for rare diseases to have global collaborations. We're also learning from alternative health systems. And then lastly, as I think many of us know, the next generation is gaga about global health, and really supporting that interest in developing global health careers is an important interest for our future workforce. And we really need new tools to reach our global health goals in whatever area it may be. It's just a constant innovation and developing new tools to be able to reach those goals. This is an example that we've used before. It's not all just infectious diseases. There's this great example of research and capacity building that Fogarty supported in Colombia in South America, where there's a very large family cohort that has an autosomal dominant form of Alzheimer's disease. And once this has been characterized, it becomes very effective and efficient to identify biomarkers for Alzheimer's disease, early biomarkers, and also to conduct intervention trials that when you know almost invariably that an individual is going to develop Alzheimer's in relatively midlife, you can do an intervention trial to prevent Alzheimer's with hundreds of people over years instead of thousands of people over a decade. So that's one example of how we really need to collaborate globally. I want to call your attention to this resource, worldreport.nih.gov. This is an online mapping tool. It maps the directly funded grants and the indirectly funded collaborations for NIH and plus others. There's 14 funding agencies that are part of this. So it includes the Gates Foundation, the Wellcome Trust, and other major funders, and has able to map 15,000 plus research institutions in 195 countries, more than 500,000 program records. So when I prepare talks, I go to World Report, and if you want to look up, who's doing research on malaria or cysticercosis or bats, this is from a One Health presentation. You can look up and see where that work is being done, who's doing it, and connect with these people. So we've used that, and just with the NIH records have mapped out where is NIH supporting global collaborations. And this is looking at the number of reports of these foreign NIH-funded records in World Report per country. And you can see the darker colors are where there's more funding, more collaborations. And Canada is actually the #1 country in terms of NIH-funded collaborations, but also high-income countries in Western Europe, and then around the world, certain countries in South America, Africa, and East Asia, Australia. So you can see where the greater collaborations are, but also see where there's relatively fewer collaborations, and which we see as opportunities, and that would include in Central Asia, parts of Africa, the Caribbean, and parts of South America. This is looking at per institute at NIH, the number of funded foreign collaborations. NIAID has more than twice as many as any other institute or center, which is not very surprising given their mission and their interest. But important to note here that every grant-making NIH institute and center supports global health research. It's really across the board that there's this activity, that there's this interest. And even the National Library of Medicine that's there at the right with the smallest number, through PubMed and their other databases, they're actually, for many people, the face around the world, the face of NIH. So it really is a global institution in that regard. These data are looking by region of the world, the number of these NIH-funded collaborations, and then by income group around the world. And so you can see the highest numbers are with Europe and Eurasia, the Western Hemisphere on the left side, and then on the right side, the greatest number of collaborations is with, it's really just a monotonic decrease by income level. The greater number of collaborations is with the higher income countries, the high income countries, and the least is with the low income countries. So also important to note, looking from 2016 to 2020, there's been a substantial increase in every region, in every income group, in the number of these collaborations. So it really is a large and growing activity at the NIH. And then switching now from the numbers of grants to the numbers of publications with Josh Grubbs, postbac, who's now a medical student at Tufts. A few years ago, we looked at, of all of the publications in PubMed that have NIH funding, what percentage of them have a non-US affiliated co-author, just a way of getting a window into the international global collaborations for NIH. And what we found is that remarkably, 35% of all NIH funded publications in 2017 had a non-US affiliated co-author. So over a third of NIH funded publications are international collaborations. The #1 country was China, which was surprising, not surprising if you think about it. And you can see how China there on the left has really increased over the years above UK, Canada, and Germany that were the next three countries. And then on the right side is looking at the lower income countries other than China, Brazil, India, and South Africa are leading there in terms of the collaborations. But the other thing that we found, we looked at the impact factor or the citation impact score for the different groups of publications. And the publications that had both a US and non-US co-authors, affiliated co-authors, had a greater citation impact score than the publications that had only US or only non-US affiliated co-authors. So it really is a big part of what NIH does and is the more impactful science by that measure of what's getting done. So now shifting gears to my next part of my talk. And if there's, did the coffee arrive? I saw something go by. And so, okay, don't all leave at once. But you are welcome to help yourselves. And if someone could get me a black coffee, that would be terrific. So some work I've been involved with for several years now was with the World Bank and CEPI, the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness and Innovation. They convened an international vaccine task force that I was a part of. This was following the West Africa Ebola outbreak, and the report, Money and Microbes, was launched at the World Health Assembly in 2018. And the key recommendation from this group is that clinical research capacity should be considered a key element of pandemic preparedness. That in addition to surveillance and laboratory and health communication, that countries should be able to do clinical research to develop medical countermeasures as part of their pandemic preparedness. And another recommendation was that Essence, a group I'll say a bit about, should come up with a mechanism for reviewing and coordinating these investments in capacity building. This is the black coffee? Okay.
So you can, in about 5 minutes, you can one by one.
2 by 2. Okay. Good. So the Essence Group is a forum of funders of health research capacity building with the WHO TDR as the secretariat. And we convened a working group in 2018 that I co-chaired together with Tabi Mayton from the South Africa MRC, who's there in the pink in the middle of the picture. And we've basically putting together a working group to help coordinate our investments in health research capacity building, and have come up with some basic indicators and metrics of health research capacity. So this is quite simple. It's just looking at in a country the number of clinical trials that have been registered in the WHO platform. And you can see the first one there, the median number of clinical trials per country is 9. The maximum for all of these is the US, with over 10,000 clinical trials per year registered during that recent 3-year period. The next is the capacity to attract funding for research, and this is using the World Report data. The median was 18, the maximum again the US with nearly 60,000 entries there. And then the third is the numbers of publications per country in Scopus, average over a 3-year period. In this, the median was 465, the maximum nearly 350,000 publications per year from a country. And so if you take those 3 sub-indicators and look at their percentiles and average them, you see, unsurprisingly, the country with the greatest research capacity is the United States. Second is China, and then it goes down. This is just the first 20, but you can see even in the first 20, there's some middle-income countries that are part of that. And it's very simplistic, but it's just a way of trying to characterize the research capacity at the national level. You'd obviously need to actually talk to people in the country about what their priorities are or what their barriers are to learn more about it. Anthony, I seem to have seized up. Oh, there we go. So, so then you can also make a map like this and see where is the research capacity around the world, and importantly, where are the holes in the map in research capacity around the world. And if we had done this 10 years ago, we would have looked at West Africa and said, boy, if there's ever an outbreak there, we're going to have a hard time doing clinical trials, which was the case with the Ebola outbreak, that it was very challenging to do the vaccine and the treatment clinical trials there in West Africa. That's actually better now because of resources that have been put in there. But we can look in Central Asia, parts of Africa, Central America, parts of South America, where if we really have this goal, which is increasingly being taken on to build research capacity, this gives us some guidance of where we need to focus our efforts. And then you can do things like make the scatter plot. Looking on the x-axis is the GDP overall, the national wealth, and on the y-axis, this measure of the research capacity. And unsurprisingly, there in the upper right corner, with high GDP and high research capacity, are the U.S. and China. But it's interesting to look along the left side of the curve. There's some countries that are sort of punching above their weight in terms of their GDP and what their research capacity is. So Uganda and Malawi, for example, and I would say let's look and see what are they doing there that they've been able to build a apparently disproportionate research capacity above and beyond their income level or their GDP. And this is really being taken on, this use of metrics, the Global Health Security Agenda, the Global Preparedness Monitoring Board, and the White House plans are all saying, let's use metrics, let's develop metrics of research capacity as part of our pandemic planning and preparedness activities. So the next steps as far as this body of work is we really want to continue strengthening the global health research capacity as a part of preparedness. We think that these simple metrics are quite useful in terms of setting targets, monitoring progress, and also can increase our efficiency and equity. And so we could, instead of saying, here's funding for any low resource country, we should be focusing some resources on those countries that are at the lower level of capacity. And then, as I mentioned, we could do case studies of countries that have really success stories and see what they've been doing from a policy or other standpoint to build their capacity. So shifting gears once again, let me now come to the Fogarty International Center. And our mission is also really twofold. We, with our resources, focus on capacity building and training in lower income countries to be able to build up their research capacity. And then we support all of the NIH and all of the institutes, partnerships and collaborations internationally. And we're named after John Fogarty, who was a congressman from Rhode Island. So as a Rhode Islander, I take special pride in our history and name at the Fogarty Center. And this is our basic model about building a global health workforce. We really need to identify individuals, train them well, and give them protected time to conduct research. We were just discussing that challenge about that need to have protected time and really have a research career, but then to also give people a mentorship, both from US investigators that have experience working internationally and from researchers in low and middle income countries. Having that dual mentorship is an important part of starting a career. And then you can see the timeline here going from an undergraduate onto a career. The research and training awards at the top, we have these so-called D43 research training awards that are in infectious diseases and non-communicable diseases and quite diverse. And then we have some individual, the K awards that are there more to the right, the K01 for US trainees, early career investigators, and the K43, which is for low and middle income country investigators. And then as people transition from training to their actual research career, the R awards, R03, R01, R21 at the bottom, generally people transition from getting support and funding from Fogarty to getting funding and support from another institute. So to really have an R01 and a research career, people move on to getting that funding and support from other NIH institutes, which is why our collaboration is so important. So it's really it's been decades. There's thousands of scientists around the world that have received training support from Fogarty. There's currently over 400 programs ongoing with more than 100 institutions around the world. And it really is quite diverse. Infectious diseases and One Health continue, but it's also now chronic conditions, a lot of work in informatics, mHealth, bioethics, implementation science is a priority. We have a big global brain disorders program and mental health research programs, tobacco cessation, and then climate change and environmental health are also emerging interests that I'll say a bit more about. This is a picture of our director, Dr. Roger Glass, and this slide just has some of our individual awards that may be of interest to some early career folks. As I mentioned, we have in the middle there the K Award for U.S. research scientists, and with this award from Fogarty, the awardees, the trainees, have to spend at least half of their time living and working in the lower middle income country. And then at the bottom is the K43 award, which is up to 5 years of mentored support and research time for LMIC research scientists. So that's relatively new and very popular. As part of this, we really emphasize equity, and this is a editorial that Roger wrote about decolonizing and democratizing global health, and how that's a challenge to do, but very important to be able to build the kind of just equitable partnerships that we value and to have sustainability over the long term. And I'll show you, again, as an epidemiologist, I needed to dig into the data. So we looked at, this is with Ezinne Akudinobi, a NPH grad who's working with me, looking at of the publications about sub-Saharan Africa that were funded by the Fogarty International Center, what proportion of them had an African affiliated first author? This is considered an important metric of equity. And at the bottom there, an earlier study found that when there's a top US university co-author, only 23% of the first authors were from an African country of the paper's focus. So what we saw on the left is just the numbers of papers, numbers of publications supported by Fogarty about sub-Saharan Africa. And in orange is the African affiliated authors. And so we can see that the blue is the US affiliated authors. So over time we flipped that we now have a higher percentage of African affiliated first authors than US affiliated first authors. And if we add together those plus authors with dual affiliations, we've gone from 47% African first authors in 2008 to 63% in 2020. So we're gratified to see that increase in leadership from African first authors as part of this. We're not sure what the goal should be. Should we go for 100%? It's important for US investigators to also have research careers and authorship. But we do want to monitor this and would encourage other institutions to look at their own results in this regard. So now getting to what we really see as the priorities for global health research in the now and going forward. Roger and I wrote a review and opinion paper in PLOS Medicine last year. This was part of a special collection about global health post-pandemic, post-COVID-19. And what we led off with is that we really think that COVID-19 gave a strong example of the importance of having health research capacity as an essential element of pandemic preparedness. So this is our background, this is our focus, but we really think that building research capacity should be a high priority to achieve our shared global health goals and increasing the resilience to address future health threats. And by the time there's an outbreak or a health research need, it's too late to start building capacity. It's something we need to be doing around the world all the time. And then secondly is the second bullet there is just, again, this theme around equity and democratization, that we've really, I think, recalibrated our perspectives about levels of expertise between higher and lower income countries. Many countries in the global south had a much better, more evidence-based response than some countries did in the global north. So really having a new sense of humility and equity is going to be important, continue to be important about our in our relationships and our partnerships going forward. But then we do enumerate some more specific areas, and as part of this, our opinion, our vision about global health research going forward, just to start off with, is around COVID-19, there has been this unprecedented response. We've got these now home rapid self-tests, treatments and improved survival, very effective vaccines, but there really is a remarkable unfinished agenda in COVID research. Just one would be around long COVID, but also questions about how do you actually effectively deploy and use rapid home self-tests to decrease transmission and improve survival. We need further implementation science around implementing the new treatments. Obviously need more vaccine research with new variants and vaccines that could provide, that could actually be more effective in preventing infection and transmission, as well as improving clinical outcomes. And then moving on to some of the other priority areas, if you look in the global burden of disease study over the last generation, the greatest increase in the disability adjusted life years has been from non-communicable diseases, heart disease, diabetes, stroke, kidney disease, and cancer. And so this is really just guides us directly to what a high research priority should be. There's overlapping risk factors for a lot of these, and hypertension or high blood sugar, high body mass index, tobacco use, air pollution. So it really also gives a window on intervention approaches and research approaches that could have a number of positive outcomes. And would also note that these are predisposing factors for severe COVID, many of these conditions, and also for long COVID. So part of the COVID research agenda is also addressing non-communicable diseases. The next major area is around One Health. And this is looking at the interconnections between humans, animals, plants, and the environment. And it's really a transdisciplinary approach, bringing in a lot of different research areas and addressing zoonotic and vector-borne diseases, antimicrobial resistance, food safety, and environmental contamination. So we see One Health as an important area. And then next is planetary health, which is really quite broad, but it includes the health impacts of climate change and declining biodiversity and increasing pollution and shortages of these natural resources. So it's another broad area that there's a lot of interest in critical need is in planetary health. And then lastly here would be around implementation research. As I've mentioned, it's one of the Fogarty's strategic goals is to really close this no-do gap in putting these evidence-based interventions into practice, into the clinic and into public health settings. So a reviewer criticized us for we have sort of an all of the above approach to what we think the priorities are, but these really are, each of these are great health threats. And there's great support from NIH in each of these areas. So I'm not going to be able to say this is the one priority or this should be the focus. It's really, I think this is good news, though, for the kinds of collaborations and partnerships you're building, that there really is a broad need and a broad interest in these many areas. I've frozen up again. Thanks. So just a couple more specific areas, and this is one of my last slides, just around climate change and health. We were excited over the last year. The White House, the Senate, all these budgets called for an additional $100 million for NIH research on climate change and health. And Fogarty was co-chairing the NIH committee, and there was a very strong interest in global research as part of that. Bad news is that it was actually removed from the final budget, so that $100 million didn't materialize. However, I can tell you there continues to be very strong interest in this area from NIH, and I would stay tuned to look for new funding opportunity announcements in support for climate change and health research, even in the absence of this new dedicated budget line. And then the second one here is around ARPA-H, the Advanced Research Projects Agency for Health, ARPA-H, that there were billions of dollars called for in the different budgets for this new program. And at the end of the day, it was a $1 billion budget that was awarded. And that's now just in the last week, the rubber's hitting the road, that the funding is coming to NIH. The agency will be within NIH. There was a lot of controversy around that. One feature is that the ARPA-H director will report to the HHS secretary, not to the NIH director. So it kind of, everyone was upset about this outcome, but this is where we are, and it makes sense to have this within NIH, where there's all of the administrative support to have this, but then to have the director be relatively independent. They want someone who's going to be bold and fail fast and take risks and those kinds of things. But just to mention, in a listening session, Dr. Collins and also Dr. Schwetz, who's been in a lead role in developing this, they were very clear that global partnerships and global activities should be part of ARPA-H. And one of the examples that was talked about is building on the experience of RADx and using this Shark Tank approach to develop rapid tests for COVID-19, that one could imagine having this applied to neglected tropical diseases and having a much more outcome-oriented, high-impact initiative around developing rapid tests for neglected tropical diseases, for example. So just to summarize, and I hope have some time for people to grab coffee and to have some discussion. I hope I've made the case that NIH is really very strongly engaged and supportive of global health research. I've shared some of the work that we're doing around using data and metrics to guide our research capacity building, and that's being taken on by others and getting traction. At Fogarty, we're very strongly committed to having equitable global health partnerships and to our research capacity strengthening mission. And again, I'd say there's really many diverse priorities and opportunities for global health research going forward. So very strongly, I'm gratified to see that the work that's being done by the SUNY group with your international partners, and I think it's a real formula for success, the different kinds of multidisciplinary teams that you're pulling together, including private sector partners and partnering with international institutions to build this. So we at Fogarty and NIH, we happy to see these activities, these applications, and really look forward to continuing to partner. So thank you for your attention, and look forward to any questions. I think I've seen some things coming in the chat, so I don't know if someone's going to moderate that or how that will work, but back over to you. Actually, sorry, Anthony, can you show my last slide? And please make the slides available and share them. But I just want to encourage everyone to connect with us. We have a weekly funding newsletter that has NIH funding as well as other funders, and then our social media that you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook, and keep in touch with us.
Questions from here? Any questions from here for?
Press the button and see if it's
Okay, that's better. Hi, my name is John Justino. I'm from the University at Albany School of Public Health, the Center for Global Health. I'm excited to see the emphasis on climate change, because that's actually something that is a particular area of expertise with atmospheric research centers at UAlbany and connections with the Department of Health. But kind of getting to issues related to non-communicable diseases in developing countries, I'm curious, what is the proportion of funding the NIH is kind of focusing on implementation science and or, proving already established methods for screening and treatment to see how would we actually really implement them in low resource settings? Like, what is the proportion of funding for implementation science versus new research, I guess is the question.
Yeah. There's a strong and growing interest in implementation research. There's a whole NIH-wide sort of interest group activity around that. There's the annual D&I conference. So NCI in particular has been very strong on implementation research. Also from NHLBI, they have their Center for Translational Research and Implementation Science, CITRIS, that also co-houses their global health activities and there's NHLBI Simple and other global activities. National Institutes of Mental Health has also been very strong. A lot of it with HIV funding, but then beyond that in implementation research. So it's actually, I'm not able to say exactly what the proportion of funding is or what the funding amount is, but there's absolutely a strong and growing interest in implementation research from across NIH and again from Fogarty. It's one of our priority areas, and we work across with different other institutes in advancing that.
And identify yourself too when you speak.
Good morning. Othman Shibli from Buffalo Dental School. So my question is, I don't know if I missed it. Is there also focus on growing population that is refugee and internally displaced populations? It's like by every year is growing by 10 million now for the last 15 years.
Yes, I couldn't include everything. Over the last several years, we've actually had an initiative around research, conducting health research in humanitarian crises, which includes refugee populations, but also weather emergencies, climate change, war, and other kinds. So from Fogarty, and I would encourage you just to look it up and see what's been done there. We've had consortium consultations, special issue publications, and ongoing work. We have a strong research ethics program that continues. It's closely related to that, but it has been a strong interest, and including from a number of other institutes that have partnered with us. We don't have a specific funding area around that, but within the different funding areas, there is some of that work going on. We're seeing now, obviously, with Ukraine and increasingly with climate and other challenges around the world, this is a growing area. There's not a National Institute for Humanitarian Crisis Research or a NIH National Institute for refugees. So it's been the kind of thing that's cross-cutting and interest from a lot of institutes. Mental health has been one that's particularly National Institute of Mental Health has been a real partner in that. So take a look. It's from the Fogarty Center for Global Health Science, and you'll see some of the work that we've done on research, conducting research in humanitarian crises.
Mm-hmm. Good.
I think we're about running out of time. So thank you very much. There was one question in the chat, which I'll share with you later. Maybe you can respond.
Sure.
And other than that, the chat was very complimentary to you.
Thank you. I look forward to the rest of the day.
Wonderful. Thank you.